The James Bond franchise, spanning over half a century and more than 25 films, has cultivated an iconic status in global cinema. Bond's license to kill is central to the character's myth, but the frequent, sometimes flamboyant use of this license has long been debated by scholars, critics, and, most importantly, fans. Across online forums, blogs, Reddit threads, and YouTube video analysis, audiences continue to scrutinize moments where Bond's killings are perceived as excessive, unnecessarily brutal, or even out of character. These discussions illuminate questions concerning the hero's morality, the franchise's tonal shifts, and wider cinematic ethics. This report examines prominent examples raised by fans and critics where Bond's kills are considered unnecessary or gratuitous. It surveys varied perspectives from film analysis blogs, academic studies, social media discussions, and direct polling, providing detailed scene descriptions and the rationale behind why each instance has provoked such debate. The films examined span the series, from the early Connery entries to the final Daniel Craig outing, highlighting both famous and lesser-known sequences. One of the earliest and most cited Bond kills debated among fans and critics is Bond's execution of Professor Dent in Dr. No. After a failed assassination attempt, Dent is lured into Bond's hotel room. He fires his gun at the bed where Bond is supposed to be in, finding it empty, and after that, Bond coldly shoots the unarmed, disarmed man twice, once while Dent is reaching for his gun, and again to finish the job. Fans repeatedly refer to this scene as a definitive introduction to Bond's dark, ruthless edge. Yet many contend the second shot, delivered after Dent is down, as a moment of needless brutality, a cold-blooded execution. Critics suggest that while Dent was an assassin, Bond's calm execution departs from self-defense into premeditated killing, casting Bond more as a state-sanctioned killer than a noble hero. In contemporary re-evaluations, the lack of remorse or hesitation is often cited as making this moment problematically excessive, especially for a scene so early in the franchise, setting a complex moral tone. While Goldfinger is somewhat lighter, fans have sometimes discussed Bond's callousness towards Oddjob, who is electrocuted while trapped. While this can be interpreted as self-defense during a fight, some commentators note how Bond does not attempt to spare or even warn Oddjob, further reinforcing Connery's Bond as ruthlessly pragmatic rather than heroic. Roger Moore's tenure is best known for its camp, but also contains moments routinely identified as excessive or simply unnecessary violence. In The Man with the Golden Gun, the killing of Scaramanga, a professional assassin, after an elaborate duel, has divided online communities. Reddit and fan blogs have suggested that although Scaramanga is Bond's professional rival, he poses little threat to global security at the climax, and could arguably have been defeated without death, or even avoided entirely, if not for MI6's intervention. Some forum discussions emphasize that Scaramanga extends hospitality to Bond, and the nature of their duel is more ritualized than necessity. The resultant death is cited as gratuitous in the context of the larger mission, demonstrating the franchise's struggle to balance adventure and violence. In Live and Let Die, Rosie Carver's execution by Dr. Kananga, while Bond looks on with little intervention, is sometimes mentioned as an example of Bond failing to act to prevent unnecessary death. While not Bond's direct kill, fan discussion has noted Bond's callous use and subsequent indifference, an example of Bond's hands-off approach sometimes coming across as abrasive or even cruel. Looking at Timothy Dalton's Bond, License to Kill is widely discussed as one of the most violent Bond films, with fans noting that Timothy Dalton's more hard-edged Bond sometimes goes beyond the justified use of force. The death of a security guard at Crest's warehouse is commonly referenced. Bond pulls an unthreatening guard into an eel tank, leading to the latter's electrocution. Reddit threads emphasize the guard was just doing his job, The casual, almost offhand way Bond dispatches the guard, not even a named character, is considered unnecessary by both fans and critics, who point out the moment feels like collateral damage for the sake of a quip. Another infamous scene shows Bond killing the treacherous DEA agent Killifer by throwing him into a shark tank as revenge for maiming Felix Leiter. Many fans applaud the vengeance aspect, but others see it as excessive and morally dubious. Bond is acting from personal anger, not professional necessity. The film itself highlights his license to kill being revoked, but Bond continues on his personal vendetta. Academic and critical reviews highlight this as a moment when Bond's role as an agent of the state slips into vengeance-driven vigilante justice, crossing a line from justified violence to personal, arguably unnecessary killing. While not always discussed as unnecessary in a moral sense, the violence against side characters like lab staff or minor goons often elicits comment for its casual tone, with Dalton's Bond dispatching faceless enemies as obstacles more than persons, raising the question, especially in the mass carnage scenes, of whether the violence is narratively justified. Pierce Brosnan's debut in GoldenEye is regularly critiqued in online discussions for its high body count, especially the scenes where Bond mows down dozens of Russian soldiers during his escape from a secret weapons facility. Forum users point out that these soldiers are simply doing their jobs, defending a military installation with no personal involvement in the villain's scheme. Commentators on Reddit and fan forums highlight how Brosnan's Bond, especially in this film, seems to enjoy unprecedented immunity. The morality of Bond killing so many, essentially conscripted soldiers, is not addressed, leading some to describe these deaths as both excessive and unnecessary for the narrative. A frequently cited example of an unnecessary kill in Brosnan's era is the elimination of a security guard during Bond's infiltration of Carver's newspaper in Tomorrow Never Dies. Unlike classic henchmen, this guard is just a regular employee at an ostensibly legitimate business. Fan analysis, especially in Reddit's James Bond forum, and detailed by users, argue Carver is a villain, but the newspaper is legit, and he'd have normal, unassuming people working for him. The security guard goes into the printing room to investigate and sees another security guard fighting someone on top of a balcony. He goes to help him out. After trading a few punches, he's thrown over the balcony to his death.
They'll print anything these days.
This scene is criticized for depicting Bond casually dispatching a minimum wage earner, rather than a villainous henchman, epitomizing the sometimes callous disregard for collateral human life in the service of the spectacle. YouTube video analysis and list-based websites, such as List of Deaths fandom, echo this critique, emphasizing how Brosnan's Bond racks up body counts among generic workers in the narrative's pursuit of explosive action rather than sticking to core antagonists. Pierce Brosnan's Bond is sometimes seen as unserious, but his execution of Elektra King in The World Is Not Enough is regarded by critics, including those at Screen Rant, as one of the darkest and arguably most unnecessary moments. Bond kills Elektra while unarmed. He follows the kill with a chilling quip.
I never miss.
Critic reviews note that she poses no immediate threat at the time and emphasize her status as a former lover, rendering the moment more execution than self-defense. This scene is thus emblematic of Bond's capacity for chilling, unnecessary violence when the emotional stakes are high, a notable divergence from earlier, more heroic portrayals. In Casino Royale, Daniel Craig's Bond is introduced through the cold executions of 2 targets to earn his 00 status. In the much-discussed black and white sequence, after a protracted, brutal fight in a bathroom, Bond kills his first target, then shoots Dryden in an office, an unarmed man, as Dryden pleads for his life. The scene is cited by fans as a deliberate shift toward a bleaker, more ambiguous Bond, reminiscent of the Connery cold kill, but updated for the 21st century. Debates persist as to whether this unnecessary execution was vital to prove Bond's credentials, or whether it crosses a line from professionalism to sociopathic behavior, fueling arguments on both sides. In the kinetic opening act, the parkour chase, Bond is seen causing significant construction site destruction, potentially harming bystanders or workers. While the film tries to show he avoids direct harm to non-combatants, fans nevertheless debate whether the scale of Bond's offensives in public spaces shows a disregard for innocent life, even if not depicted with bodies on screen, and they ask whether less lethal solutions would befit a new, more thoughtful Bond. A scene that regularly provokes dismay among fans is the death of Bond's ally, Mathis, in Quantum of Solace. Bond's reaction, placing Mathis's body in a dumpster, has been widely criticized online as unnecessary callous, regardless of whether Bond is emotionally hardened after Vesper's betrayal. Reddit users and fan critics see this as a microcosm of Craig's Bond at his worst. Cold, emotionally detached, treating friends' deaths with near indifference. A betrayal, many feel, of the franchise's heart. Perhaps the most widely referenced unnecessary death of the Craig era occurs in Skyfall, when Severine, a sex-trafficked Bond girl/ally, is executed by villain Silva, while Bond is forced to watch. Bond neither attempts to intervene nor expresses visible distress, immediately making a flippant remark.
It's a waste of good scotch.
This moment is termed by many Redditors, critics and bloggers as one of the most callous moments in Bond history, and stands as a key example of excessive emotional detachment, provoking debate over whether this constitutes a failure of heroism or a deliberate portrayal of Bond's brokenness. Critics argue that Bond's refusal to attempt to save or avenge Severine, or even express meaningful regret, marks an erosion of audience empathy. As one Reddit user puts it, the moment was completely out of character for Bond, who, throughout the franchise, has proven to be someone who protects the vulnerable, particularly women. His casual quip after her death made him seem disturbingly detached, which was quite a contrast to the overarching theme of Skyfall. Though less debated than other entries, the destruction of the Moroccan desert facility in Spectre is sometimes cited as excessive. Fan and critic blogs raise questions about Bond blowing up the entire villainous lair, noting that the explosion is indiscriminate. It is unclear how many innocent workers or prisoners are present. This is seen as a callback to the wanton destruction of classic Bond films, but some commentators wonder whether such large-scale devastation is justified, arguing that a more restrained approach could have sufficed once the key antagonists were neutralized. The franchise made history when Daniel Craig's Bond was killed at the end of No Time to Die. Bond sacrifices himself to ensure that a nanobot-based virus cannot infect his family or infect anyone he comes in contact with. While framed as a necessary act of self-sacrifice, online debates and reviews in major fan forums reveal a sharp divide. Some contend the death was a poignant, daring conclusion, while others call it gratuitous, unnecessary or contrived. MI6 could arguably have carried out the missile strike with Bond having escaped. This debate is marked by two camps: those who see Bond's death as an essential emotional payoff for a character arc built around trauma and brokenness, and those for whom it smacks of overwrought drama or a franchise trying too hard to make a mark. As one Reddit commentator summarized, "It didn't really fit the story. Instead, they made the story fit the idea that they really wanted to kill him." The only positive I can say about it is that Daniel Craig played Bond as somebody who hated the character and hated the job, so if you were going to kill any of them, this would be the one to do it. Across all eras, one of the most common points of contention arises from Bond kills that target or inadvertently encompass side characters, guards or bystanders perceived as guilty only by employment. The franchise's penchant for high body counts, especially in later Brosnan and Craig films, as statistically confirmed in various kill count analyses, means that the moral clarity of Bond's violence is frequently muddied. Security guards, scientists, or even other intelligence agents on the wrong side are frequently victims, and their deaths often receive little, if any, narrative attention. Discourse regularly distinguishes between Bond killing directly in self-defense to save lives or as a matter of international security versus acts of revenge or anger. The latter, most notably Dalton's Bond in License to Kill or Brosnan's execution of an unarmed Electra King, attract some of the most heated debate, as fans argue about whether such actions represent the character's evolution, decline, or a betrayal of the series' heroic core. Death's emotional impact on Bond is a litmus test for his humanity in fan evaluations. The most condemned instances, like Mathis' disposal, Severine's execution, or the deaths of allies and innocent staff, are those where Bond shows little or no emotional response, reinforcing fears that the character is becoming less a human hero and more a killing machine. Academic studies echo the fan debate, with research in media violence noting that Bond films have grown significantly more violent over time, especially in the severity and depiction of deaths rather than in sheer numbers. One JAMA pediatric study quantified that the number of violent acts, particularly severe ones like punching, shooting, or executing with weapons, doubled between 1962's Dr. No and 2008's Quantum of Solace. Reviewers argue that Bond's violence, once framed as heroic or necessary, is now presented more graphically and sometimes comfortingly detached, bolstering both thrill and discomfort for contemporary audiences. Some scholars view the scenes most debated by fans as touchstones for wider cultural anxieties. Bond's unnecessarily violent acts reflect shifting attitudes towards state power, personal responsibility, and cinematic heroism. The increase in violent content of Bond movies likely reflects a general increase in the exposure of young people to media violence, notes Dr. Bob Hancock of the University of Otago, highlighting Bond as both catalyst and mirror for on-screen violent trends. Direct polls and most unnecessary Bond kill threads consistently spotlight a recurring set of scenes, although preferences vary by generation and attitude toward newer films versus classics. Severine's death in Skyfall, the execution of unarmed foes like Professor Dent or Electra King and Dryden, and ostentatious slaughter of soldiers or guards dominate Reddit, Ranker, fandom, and classic web forum rankings. Twitter and YouTube compilations often annotate particularly excessive moments with editorial commentary or snark, and meme culture has latched onto Brosnan's disproportionately high kill count as an emblem of heroic excess in the 1990s. The question of unnecessary or excessive killing is a perennial one for the James Bond franchise and its fans. Bond's violence has provided both catharsis and confrontation, sometimes thrilling, sometimes chilling, and always provocative in its moral ambiguity. Whether through the cold executions of Connery, the camp overkill of Moore, the wounded vengeance of Dalton, Brosnan's blockbuster carnage, or Craig's emotionally fraught ruthlessness, Bond's License to Kill acts as both narrative winch and cultural touchstone. The very existence of such vibrant, sustained debate across decades, platforms, and generations suggests that the essential problem of Bond's violence is woven into the fabric of the character and the series itself. For some, unnecessary kills are evidence of narrative failure or ethical lapse. For others, they constitute a deliberate, provocative realism, a necessary darkness for a modern myth. Perhaps, finally, the central tension and the enduring interest of Bond's violence lies in its unresolved nature. Each excessive act both undermines and reinforces his heroism, leaving audiences to judge, debate, and ultimately reinterpret the meaning of Bond's license to kill.